The sound of my son laughing at me cut sharper than the freezing wind atop the azure crown. He clinked his crystal glass, toasting to a $100 million infusion for the logistics empire I had built from nothing, while I stood there in a thrifted suit begging for scraps. He saw a 58-year-old relic. He did not see the woman who was about to pull the rug out from under his entire life. My name is Evelyn Marsh, and at 58 years old, I felt less like a person and more like a ghost haunting my own legacy. The cold wind whipping across the rooftop of the Azure Crown restaurant in Ravensport bit through the thin fabric of my navy polyester suit. It was a suit I had bought at a discount rack 5 years ago, yet here I was, standing on the periphery of success, surrounded by bespoke Italian wool and shimmering silk dresses that cost more than my car. My son Noah stood in the center of it all under the warm glow of amber string lights, holding court, with a glass of vintage champagne in his hand. He was celebrating a new funding round for Evertide Logistics. $100 million. The number floated in the air like expensive perfume, intoxicating the young founders and influencers who orbited him like moths to a golden flame. I stood near the edge of the terrace, clutching a thin faux leather folder against my chest, trying to shrink my 5'5" frame into the shadows. I was the stain on this pristine picture of modern wealth. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone, drawing the room's attention. And let us hear it for the man of the hour, the visionary self-made CEO who built this beast from the ground up, Noah Marsh. Applause thundered. I flinched physically at the words. Self-made. The phrase tasted like ash on my tongue. A young woman in a backless red dress leaned toward him and asked loud enough for me to hear over the clinking glasses. What about your mother? Didn't she start the company back in the day? Noah waved a dismissive hand, spilling a drop of champagne. Oh, you know how it is. Mom is happier now. She prefers gardening and watching her game shows. The heavy lifting isn't for her anymore. Laughter rippled through the group, polite and cruel. I swallowed the lump in my throat. When the speeches died down and the music swelled back up, I saw my opening. I stepped forward and touched Noah's elbow. He turned his smile tight and impatient when he saw it was me. Mom. He said, his voice dropping an octave so the investors wouldn't hear his annoyance. I am working the room. What is it I need 5 minutes? Noah. I said softly, opening the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a simple sketch. It was not much, just a plan for a boutique logistics consulting firm focused on female entrepreneurs and a breakdown of the remaining mortgage on my small cabin by the lake. I have an idea. A small consultancy. I just need a bridge loan to clear the house debt so I can focus on it. It is not much money. Just $40,000. Noah looked at the paper, then at me. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud barking sound that drew eyes from 3 tables away. He raised his voice deliberately, pitching it for the venture capitalists standing nearby. Guys, you have to hear this, he announced, grinning like a shark. My mother wants a seed round for her knitting club. The group erupted in laughter. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold. They looked at me with pity. The kind of pity you reserve for a confused child or a senile pet. Before I could pull the folder back, a manicured hand snatched it away. It was Sienna, his wife. She shimmered in silver, looking every bit the star influencer she claimed to be. She flipped the page, her eyes scanning the numbers with open disdain. Oh, Evelyn. She sighed, shaking her head. This is cute, but think about brand safety. We can't have a confused old woman on the Evertide cap table. It sends the wrong message to the market. Investors want stability, not emotional instability. She let go of the folder. It did not land on the table. It landed directly into a large silver bucket filled with melting ice and half-empty champagne bottles. The heavy thud of the leather hitting the water seemed louder than the jazz band. I watched the ink on my business plan begin to bleed instantly, turning my future into a blue smudge. Noah did not reach for it. He just smirked, finding his wife's cruelty amusing. A venture capitalist in a grey suit leaned in close to Noah's ear, but his whisper was loud enough to carry to me. "You might want to look into long-term care facilities, Noah. It is better to handle the decline before it gets embarrassing." My hand gripped the cold metal railing of the balcony. My knuckles turned white. They thought I was trembling from age or shame. They were wrong. I was trembling from rage. I reached into the ice bucket. My hand went numb in the freezing water as I retrieved the sodden mess of my dignity. Water dripped from the folder onto my cheap shoes. I looked up and met Noah's eyes. He looked bored, waiting for me to cry or plead. "I understand." I said, my voice steady and quiet. "I will never ask you again." I turned my back on the lights, the laughter, and the son who had just publicly executed my pride. Noah probably thought he had just dealt with a nuisance. He had no idea he had just signed his own death warrant. The night bus rattled as it navigated the potholes on the way out to the suburbs. I sat near the back, with my forehead pressed against the cold glass, watching the highway lights smear into long streaks of neon. A massive semi-trailer roared past us in the fast lane. On its side, painted in reflective silver against deep navy, was the stylized wave logo of Evertide Logistics. My heart gave a painful thud. I knew that fleet number. It was one of the first 10 long haulers I had bought back when I still checked the tire pressure on every single rig myself. My reflection in the window ghosted over the truck. I looked old and tired, but my mind was drifting back to the beginning. I remembered the smell of stale coffee and diesel fumes that permeated the cabin of my first beat-up pickup truck. I was 25 years old back then, with no husband and a baby screaming in the car seat next to me. I drove 18 hours a day delivering urgent parcels that the big companies ignored. I remembered pulling into rest stops at 3 a.m. just to close my eyes for 20 minutes, while Noah slept curled up in a ball on the passenger seat, wrapped in my flannel jacket. Every dollar I made went into a coffee tin until I had enough for a second truck. Then a third. The memory shifted. Noah was 16 years old, standing in the driveway with a bucket of soapy water. He threw the sponge into the grit with a splash that soaked his expensive sneakers. "I am not doing this anymore, Mom." He had snapped at me. His face twisted in disgust. "I am not going to spend my life smelling like cheap oil and sweat like you do. I am meant for bigger things." I had laughed it off then. I told myself it was just teenage hormones. I told myself he would learn to respect the grit. I was wrong. He never learned to respect the work, only the money it produced. The bus hissed to a halt at the bottom of the hill in Oak Ridge Heights. I walked the half-mile up the winding road to Noah's estate. It was a sprawling mansion of glass and steel that I had paid for. I did not go to the front door. Instead, I walked around the side to the detached garage. Above it was the granny flat they had renovated for me. It was their way of keeping me close enough to control, but far enough away to ignore. The room was small and decorated in beige tones that felt like a waiting room for the afterlife. I locked the door and pulled the curtains tight. I shoved the heavy oak coffee table aside and rolled back the thin Persian rug. One of the floorboards was loose. I pried it up with the handle of a metal spoon, revealing the small, fireproof safe I had bolted to the subfloor 3 years ago. My fingers did not shake as I spun the dial. Click. The heavy door swung open. Inside lay my true insurance policy, an encrypted hard drive, a burner phone with a battery I kept charged religiously, and a thick blue folder labelled Marsh Family Stewardship Trust. I opened the folder. The paper was yellowing slightly. I remembered the day I signed it sitting in the mahogany office of Marta Klein, my oldest friend, and the sharpest corporate shark I knew. It was right before the initial public offering. Noah was pushing to be named CEO, and I wanted to give him the world. But Marta had stopped me. "You love him, Evelyn, but you are blind to his greed." Marta had warned me, tapping her pen on the desk. "We need a failsafe, a kill switch." She had drafted the Raven Clause. It was a provision buried deep in the trust bylaws. It stated that I remained the grantor with full revocable powers. It stipulated that if the beneficiary demonstrated gross financial negligence or publicly humiliated the founder, the grantor could unilaterally revoke all voting rights and reclaim the assets immediately. Tonight, Noah had not just humiliated me. He had made a show of it. He had handed me the key to his own destruction. I picked up the burner phone and dialed the single number stored in its memory. It rang twice before a groggy voice answered. Evelyn Marta asked. "It is 1 a.m. Is everything all right?" "He did it, Marta," I said. My voice sounded strange in the small room. It was devoid of motherly warmth. He laughed at me, in front of the investors. He threw my business plan in an ice bucket. There was a silence on the other end. Then the rustling of sheets and the click of a bedside lamp. "Okay," Marta said, her voice shifting instantly from sleepy friend to ruthless attorney. "I am sorry, Evelyn. I know you hoped this day would never come." "Activate the Raven Clause," I commanded. "I want an emergency board meeting called for 7 a.m. Revoke his CEO proxy. And Marta, I want every bank account associated with the trust frozen before the markets open. I want him to wake up to a zero balance." "Consider it done," Marta replied. "I will have the papers served by breakfast." I hung up. I reached back into the safe and pulled out a single sheet of paper I had filed 6 months ago, just in case. It was the incorporation document for a shell company called Glass Harbor Dynamics, LLC. It was clean, empty, ready. I took a black pen from my pocket. Underneath the registration date, I wrote a single line in my jagged handwriting. The day Noah laughed at me. Phase 1 begins. Dawn broke over Ravensport, not with a burst of sunlight, but with the grey steel of a coming storm. I sat in a booth at a 24-hour diner called The Rusty Spoon, with a mug of black coffee and my battered laptop open before me. I was not there to eat. I was there to conduct an execution. My screen glowed with the dashboard of the Marsh Family Stewardship Trust. I watched the status bars turn from green to red, one by one. It was rhythmic and soothing, like a heartbeat. Personal checking frozen. Investment portfolio frozen. Black card declined. 5 miles away in his glass penthouse, Noah was waking up to a digital nightmare. I could picture it perfectly. His phone would be vibrating off the nightstand with frantic texts from the Evertide chief financial officer. I knew the CFO well. He was a nervous man who panicked at the slightest irregularity. "System failure," the texts would say. "Cannot access operating funds for payroll." Noah would rub the sleep from his eyes and curse, assuming it was a glitch. He would open his personal banking app, expecting to see the 7-figure balance he bragged about. Instead, he would see a 0. Next to it, in bold red letters, were the words "Locked, Trustee Override." I took a sip of bitter coffee. "Good morning, son," I whispered to the empty diner. At the Oak Ridge estate, chaos was blooming. I checked the smart home logs, which I still had administrative access to. The master bathroom water heater had just shut down. "Noah." Sienna's voice echoed in my imagination, shrill and furious. "The water is freezing. Why did the lights just go out?" She did not know that the utility bills were auto-paid by a subsidiary of the trust. I had cancelled the mandate 3 minutes ago. Noah's investor group chat, a collection of arrogant young men who called themselves the Wolf Pack, was the next to explode. My laptop pinged with intercepted notifications. One of them had shared a screenshot from the Securities and Exchange Commission website. It was a formal notice of an emergency board meeting called by the founder and grantor. My name was back on the radar. Evelyn Marsh was no longer a gardener. My burner phone buzzed. It was Noah. I let it ring. He called again, and again. Finally, he left a voicemail. I plugged in my earphones to listen. "Mum, pick up the phone." His voice cracked with a mix of confusion and rage. "This is insanity. You are stealing my company. I built this. You can't just lock me out of my own accounts. Call me back, or I swear to God I will." He trailed off, breathless. I saved the recording. Marta had already instructed the mobile carrier to preserve all logs. He had just accused the legal owner of stealing her own property. It was a beautiful mistake. I switched windows to a secure video link. Marta appeared on the screen, looking sharp in her blazer, sitting in her office. She was broadcasting the internal feed from the Evertide boardroom. The board members sat around the mahogany table, looking pale, and whispered among themselves. Noah's chair at the head of the table was empty. "The motion on the floor," Marta said to the room, her voice tinny through my laptop speakers, "is the immediate removal of Noah Marsh as CEO due to gross fiduciary negligence and violation of the moral clause. All in favour." Hands went up. All of them. Fear is a powerful motivator, and they knew who held the purse strings now. "Motion passed," Marta said. "We will appoint an interim CEO effective immediately." While they scrambled, I executed the final command of the morning. Years ago, I had separated the company's intellectual property from its operations. Evertide Logistics moved the boxes, but the routing algorithms and the brand trademarks were held by a dormant entity I controlled. With a single click, I initiated the transfer of those licensing agreements to Glass Harbor Dynamics. The fee for the transfer was set at $1. Evertide was now a body without a brain. On the screen, I saw the security feed from the penthouse garage. Noah stormed in, wearing half a suit, his face red with exertion. He ran to his limited edition supercar, a vehicle that cost more than my entire first fleet. He pressed the key fob. Nothing happened. He pulled the handle. Locked. The bank had already initiated the remote repossession protocol. Noah kicked the tire, screaming something I could not hear. Behind him, through the garage windows, I could see the highway. A line of Evertide trucks was rolling out of the distribution center on schedule. The business was running perfectly fine. The gears of commerce were turning. They just did not need him anymore. I closed my laptop and left a $5 tip on the table. The coffee had been terrible, but the show was worth every penny. The evening sun did not set on a luxury suite for my son and his wife. It set on the peeling paint of the Starlight Motel, a dilapidated establishment huddled by the side of the interstate. It was the only place that accepted cash without asking questions. Noah dragged 2 Louis Vuitton suitcases across the cracked asphalt. His wrist felt light and unfamiliar. Just an hour ago, he had pawned his Patek Philippe watch for $2,000, a fraction of its value, just to pay for a week in this hellhole. The room smelled of damp carpet and decades of stale cigarette smoke. A neon light from the sign outside blinked rhythmically, casting a sickly red glow through the thin curtains. Sienna dropped her designer bag onto the bed and looked around in horror. Then, instinct took over. She pulled out her phone, found a corner with decent lighting, and forced a bright smile for the camera. "Hey guys," she chirped, her voice pitching up 2 octaves. "Noah and I decided to do a spontaneous digital detox staycation. We are going totally minimalist to reconnect with our roots. It is so grounding." She posted the story to her 50,000 followers. The moment the camera lowered, her smile vanished. She opened her own banking app, confident that her personal influencer business was safe. It was an entity she claimed she built herself. She screamed. It was a sharp, piercing sound that made Noah jump. "What is this?" she shrieked, shoving the phone in his face. "It says, account under review. Beneficial owner discrepancy. Noah." "Why can't I access my money?" Noah rubbed his temples. "Because the seed money for your brand came from the trust. Sienna. Mum's lawyers. They must have flagged it as a subsidiary asset. Everything is frozen." His phone rang. It was his personal lawyer. Noah put it on speaker, his hand shaking. "I checked the bylaws." "Noah," the lawyer said, his tone dry and unsympathetic. "The Raven clause is ironclad. By publicly humiliating Evelyn Marsh at a corporate event, you triggered a total revocation. You do not own those assets. You never did. You were a beneficiary with privileges. And those privileges, they are gone." The line went dead. Sienna sat on the edge of the sagging mattress. She looked at Noah not with love, but with pure venom. "You idiot," she hissed. "You let a 58-year-old woman, a woman who wears polyester suits, take everything from us. You told me she was weak. You said she was senile." Noah stood up, his face flushed with a dark, ugly anger. He had been humiliated by the world, and now he was being humiliated by his wife. "She is not winning." Noah growled, pacing the small room like a caged animal. "I will take it all back. I will make her the villain of this story. If she wants to play hardball, I will show everyone exactly how frail she really is." He sat down at the sticky desk and opened his laptop, connecting to the motel's slow Wi-Fi. He began typing furiously. Emergency guardianship, signs of dementia in elderly parents, competency hearings. He read aloud, testing the words on his tongue, learning the language of the concerned victim. "I just want to protect Mom from herself. She is not making rational decisions. She is confused." Sienna caught on instantly, her eyes lit up. "The keys," she said. "Remember last Thanksgiving? She couldn't find her car keys for 10 minutes. "Exactly," Noah said, nodding. And the time she repeated that story about the first truck repetitive speech patterns, early onset Alzheimer's. They spent the next hour rewriting our family history, every lapse in attention, every moment of fatigue. Every normal sign of aging was twisted into a symptom of severe cognitive decline. They rehearsed the narrative until it sounded seamless. They were no longer greedy children. They were heartbroken caregivers forced to intervene. Noah's phone buzzed with a text from a shady associate he had contacted earlier. It was a name and an address. Dr. Lowell Haynes. The Blue Anchor Bar. 9 p.m. I have a doctor, Noah said, grabbing his coat. He specializes in difficult evaluations for high net worth individuals. An hour later, in a dimly lit bar near the county hospital, Noah slid a thick envelope across a scarred wooden table. Opposite him sat Dr. Haynes, a man with watery eyes and the look of someone who had sold his ethics a long time ago. I need a professional opinion, Noah said, keeping his voice low. My mother. She is a danger to her own financial well-being. I need a medical hold. A 72-hour observation period would give me enough time to get a temporary injunction on her assets. Haynes peeked inside the envelope, counting the bills with a practiced thumb. He nodded slowly. Paranoia is a common symptom, the doctor murmured. If she were to react aggressively to a medical intervention, that would certainly justify immediate sedation and confinement. Noah returned to the motel room just before midnight. He sat on the edge of the bed and opened a cheap spiral notebook he had bought at the gas station. On the cover, in jagged, heavy letters, he wrote his new mission statement. Overturning the trust equals proving Mom is incompetent. He slammed the notebook shut. The plan had a shape now. It was dirty. It was cruel. And he was absolutely going to do it. Cole Barker was a man who smelled like stale donuts and disappointment. He sat low in the driver's seat of a rusted sedan, trailing me from the discount grocery store to the community center where I volunteered. His long lens camera clicked rhythmically, like a mechanical insect documenting every move I made. I knew he was there. I had spotted his reflection in a shop window 3 blocks ago, but I did not speed up. I let him watch. Later that evening, in the damp motel room, Noah and Sienna huddled around a laptop dissecting my life frame by frame. They watched footage of me standing at a checkout counter squinting as I dug through my purse for my reading glasses. Freeze it there, Noah commanded. He pointed a shaking finger at the screen. Look, she is confused. She can't even handle a simple transaction. Sienna smirked, tapping a manicured nail against the glass. Write it down. Disorientation regarding financial exchange. And look at this next clip where she walks past her car. Short-term memory failure. This is Gold Noah. While they built their collage of lies, Noah met Dr. Haynes again in the shadows of the Blue Anchor. He slid a thick envelope across the sticky table. It contained $5,000 in cash, which was the last of the liquidity he could scrape together. I need a signature, Doctor. Noah said, his voice tight with desperation. I need you to certify that she lacks the capacity to manage her estate. I need a guardianship recommendation. Haynes took the envelope. He looked at the money with the weary eyes of a man whose soul had been sold off piece by piece years ago. A signature is one thing, Haynes said quietly, tucking the envelope into his jacket. But for a judge to grant an emergency 72-hour hold, we need an incident. If you can provoke a paranoid outburst in a clinical setting, it would give me the justification to sedate her for her own safety. While they plotted my demise, I was sitting in a plastic booth at a diner in the industrial district. Across from me sat Diego Ruiz, the chief operating officer of Evertide, and 3 of my best lane managers. They looked tired. They had been keeping the company running while Noah played celebrity. I slid a tablet across the table, showing them the real balance sheet. He is bleeding the company dry. Diego whispered, his face paling as he scrolled through the numbers. The reserves are gone. He spent the maintenance budget on a yacht party. The ship is sinking. Diego, I said, leaning in. But I built a life raft. It is called Glass Harbor Dynamics. It is a new company, lean, focused, and I want you and your teams to run it. You will get real equity this time, not the phantom stock options Noah promised you. Diego looked up at me. Hope warred with loyalty in his eyes. I have a memorandum of understanding with Northline Retail Co-op. I added, playing my ace card. If Evertide fails to meet their delivery metrics for 3 consecutive days, Northline triggers a clause to switch vendors. They are coming to Glass Harbor. The contract is already drafted. Diego extended his hand. I am in, Evelyn. We are all in? I left the diner feeling lighter. As I walked to the parking lot, I glanced at the rear-view mirror of a parked car. The grey sedan was there 2 rows back. Barker was filming. I stopped. I decided to give him a show. I walked deliberately past my own truck and stopped at a random blue sedan. I tried the handle. I frowned. I patted my pockets theatrically, acting flustered. I waited until I heard the faint click of his shutter before I realized my mistake and walked back to my vehicle. Good boy, Cole, I thought. Make sure you get my good side. That night, in my small room above the garage, Marta and I sat amidst a sea of paperwork. I signed the final incorporation documents for Glass Harbor Dynamics. My hand was steady. The pen moved with the precision of a surgeon. Marta organized the stack of papers and poured 2 small glasses of cheap wine. She held hers up, a small smile playing on her lips. You know, she said, her eyes twinkling with dark humor. By freezing the assets and forcing you to liquidate the old contracts, Noah has technically funded the startup costs of the company that will destroy him. He just became your first angel investor. I clinked my glass against hers. To Noah, I said softly. The most generous son a mother could ask for. I placed the appointment card on the refrigerator door with a deliberate slowness. The magnet was a cheap plastic lemon, but it held the destiny of my company in its grip. I positioned the card at eye level and nudged the carton of milk aside so the bold blue letters were perfectly visible through the kitchen window. Serenity Ridge Center. Memory Care and Geriatric Assessment. Tuesday, 9:00 a.m. I knew Cole Barker was out there in the bushes with his telephoto lens. I counted to 10 in my head and turned away to pour water into the kettle. I could almost hear the shutter click. The bait had been taken. Miles away in their cramped motel room, Noah and Sienna were likely staring at the zoomed-in image on a laptop screen, with the excitement of vultures spotting a dying animal. They believed they had found the smoking gun. I could imagine Noah pacing the stained carpet and rehearsing his lines. She is seeking help on her own. He would be telling Sienna. This proves she knows something is wrong. We just need to nudge the diagnosis. They spent the afternoon refining their script. Noah called the clinic, pretending to be the heartbroken son. He told the receptionist that his mother was prone to violent outbursts and that he was terrified for her safety. Dr. Haynes was scheduled to arrive at the clinic, coincidentally at the same time carrying a pre-filled observation order in his briefcase. Sienna cleaned the lens of her smartphone, preparing to film the entire encounter as evidence for the probate court. While they plotted their ambush, Marta was sitting in the sun-drenched office of the director of Serenity Ridge. The room smelled of pine and expensive sanitizer. Marta slid a heavy binder across the desk. As you can see from the updated shareholder register, Marta said calmly, Evelyn Marsh quietly acquired 51% of this facility last month through a holding company. She is not just a patient, Dr. Eris. She is your boss. The director nodded solemnly. He looked at the paperwork, detailing the police sting operation. We have alerted the Elder Abuse Unit. 2 plainclothes officers will be stationed as orderlies in the lobby. The cameras have been upgraded to high-definition audio and video. Back in my small apartment above the garage, I stood before the bathroom mirror practicing my performance. I let my shoulders slump forward. I relaxed the muscles around my mouth until my jaw hung slightly loose. I blinked slowly, creating a vacancy in my eyes that mimicked the fog of age. I don't remember where I put the thing. I whispered to my reflection, testing the waver in my voice. It had to be convincing enough to make Noah and Haynes commit to their crime, but subtle enough that when I dropped the act, the contrast would be undeniable on camera. I signed the privacy waivers that Marta had sent over. These documents authorized Serenity Ridge to release all security footage to the court, and the district attorney effectively stripping Noah of any argument about medical privacy. My phone buzzed with a notification from the bank monitoring service. A transaction had just cleared on a secondary account. Noah had transferred $10,000 to Dr. Haynes. I traced the source of funds. He had sold Sienna's second wedding ring, a platinum band, with channel-set diamonds to a pawnshop in the city. I wondered if she knew. Judging by the silence from her social media accounts, the cracks in their united front were beginning to widen. Night fell heavy and suffocating. I sat alone at my small kitchen table with a cold cup of tea. In front of me was a framed photograph of the first ever-tied warehouse. I ran my thumb over the glass. I was not fearless. My hands were cold, and my stomach churned with a very real nausea. If this went wrong, Dr. Haynes could sedate me before the police intervened. Once you are in the system with a psychiatric hold, it is incredibly difficult to get out. I was risking my freedom to save my legacy. I picked up my burner phone and typed a single message to Diego. If I do not message you by noon tomorrow, take the team to Glass Harbor. Do not look back. I sent it. Then I turned off the lights and lay down in the dark, listening to the wind and waiting for the sun to rise on the most dangerous day of my life. The rain in Ravensport was a fine, cold mist that clung to everything it touched. I stepped through the automatic doors of Serenity Ridge, with my hair deliberately unkempt and my old yellow raincoat buttoned up wrong. I had left my cane in the car. Without it, I looked smaller and more unsteady. I looked exactly like the victim Noah wanted me to be. The receptionist was a woman named Sarah, whom I had briefed personally 2 days ago. She looked up from her computer, and her eyes widened just a fraction before she slipped into character. "Good morning, Ms. Marsh," Sarah said, her voice pitched high and soothing, the way one speaks to a frightened child. "Are you feeling all right today? Did you forget your appointment time?" I blinked rapidly, clutching the strap of my purse with both hands. I did not answer. I just stared at the fake ficus tree in the corner, ensuring my profile was perfectly captured by the ceiling camera. 30 seconds later, the glass doors flew open. Noah strode in, bringing a gust of wet wind and the manic energy of a man who believes he is about to win a race. Sienna was right behind him, holding her phone up horizontally with the red recording light blinking. Trailing them was Dr. Haynes, clutching a battered leather medical bag to his chest. "She is here," Noah shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at me. He turned to the receptionist. His face flushed. "My mother is having a dangerous financial delusion. I am her son. I demand you let her personal physician see her immediately." I took a step back, acting as though his voice physically hurt me. I looked around the lobby with wide, fearful eyes. "Noah, I whispered, my voice trembling just enough for the microphones to catch. I thought we were going to lunch, Sienna hissed from behind her phone screen, zooming in on my face. She doesn't even know what day it is. She is totally gone, guys. Dr. Haynes stepped forward. He moved with a hasty, sweating urgency. He reached into his bag, and I saw the glint of a pre-loaded syringe concealed in his palm. He was not planning on an examination. He was planning on an immediate chemical restraint. Ms. Marsh. Haynes said, his voice oily and fake. I am just going to give you something to help you relax. It is just a vitamin shot. I watched him. I watched the syringe. And then I looked up at the high-resolution camera mounted above the reception desk. The trap was set. The door was closed. I straightened my spine. The trembling in my hands vanished instantly. I looked directly at my son. Noah. I said, my voice projecting clear and sharp across the silent lobby. You brought a private doctor with a concealed sedative to a facility where I am the majority shareholder. Do you honestly think any law in this state will stand by you? Noah froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at me, and then he looked at the receptionist, who was no longer smiling. Haynes did not process the shift in power. He was too committed to the payout. He lunged forward, holding out a stack of papers to a young woman in scrubs who had just walked out from the hallway. I have the initial assessment right here. Haynes stammered, waving the forms. I have signed the 72-hour hold order based on her aggressive behavior. Nurse, please help me restrain her. The nurse took the papers. She looked at the signature, which was dated 20 minutes ago. Then she looked at Haynes. You signed a medical evaluation. Before you even entered the building, she asked, her voice dropping its gentle facade to reveal the steel tone of a detective. Haynes panicked. He realized something was wrong. In a last-ditch effort to justify his actions, he raised the syringe and reached for my arm. She is unstable, he yelled. I am sedating her for crash. The double doors on both sides of the hallway burst open. Uniformed officers and plainclothes detectives flooded the lobby like a blue tide. A large officer tackled Haynes before the needle could graze my skin. The syringe went flying, spinning across the linoleum floor until it hit the wall with a hollow plastic clack. Police, the officer shouted, pinning Haynes to the ground. Drop the bag. Do it now. Noah stumbled back, hitting the reception desk. Sienna dropped her phone. It landed face up, continuing to live stream the ceiling as the police swarmed them. Detective Miller, the woman dressed as the nurse, pulled a badge from her scrub pocket. She read the rights to Dr. Haynes, who was now whimpering on the floor. Lowell Haynes. You are under arrest for medical fraud, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and the attempted abuse of a vulnerable adult. She recited. She turned to my son and his wife. Noah Marsh, Sienna Marsh. Please place your hands behind your backs. You are being detained for questioning regarding conspiracy and fraud. No. Noah screamed, struggling as an officer grabbed his wrists. This is a mistake. She is setting us up. She is the crazy one. I stood perfectly still, watching them cuff my son. I smoothed down the front of my raincoat. I brushed a lock of wet hair from my face. I did not look like a victim anymore. I looked like a CEO. As they dragged Noah past me, he looked into my eyes, searching for the mother who used to forgive him for everything. He found only the founder of Evertide. You chose this battlefield, Noah, I said coldly. It is a pity you didn't check the property records. I own the whole building. The bail bondsman took the keys to Noah's last remaining luxury sedan, a convertible he had bought to impress a client he never landed. That was the price of freedom. After a humiliating night in the county lockup, Noah and Sienna walked out on bail, but instead of retreating into the shadows as their defense attorney advised, Noah did the unthinkable. He filed an emergency civil motion against me for breach of fiduciary duty and theft of corporate assets. He was not just fighting for money anymore. He was fighting to control the narrative. The hearing at the Ravensport Superior Court was a circus. Reporters swarmed the steps, their microphones thrust forward like spears. I saw the headlines on the newsstands: Evertide Civil War and Founder versus Son Who is the Real Villain. I walked past them with my head high, ignoring the flashing cameras. Inside, the courtroom was small and frigid, lit by buzzing fluorescent tubes that made everyone look pale. I sat at the defendant's table wearing a simple navy dress with no jewelry. I held a cheap ballpoint pen in my hand, gripping it tight. I was not the frail grandmother they expected. I was the truck driver who used to negotiate contracts in roadside diners. Noah took the stand first. He wore a suit that was slightly wrinkled, a calculated choice to make him look overworked and underappreciated. He looked at the jury, then at the reporters in the back row, performing for an audience of millions. "I have sacrificed everything for this company," Noah said, his voice catching in his throat as if he were holding back tears. "I gave up my 20s to build what my mother started. But she is not well, Your Honor. I love my mother, but she has become paranoid. She thinks everyone is out to get her." He wiped a dry eye. The incident at the clinic was a terrible misunderstanding. Dr. Haynes, he went too far. I didn't know he had a sedative. I just wanted to get her a checkup. I was desperate to stop her from destroying the company because of her delusions. He was good. I had to give him that. He almost sounded human. Then Marta stood up. She did not use emotion. She used a projector. "Mr. Marsh claims to be a devoted steward of the company," Marta said, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. "Let us look at Exhibit C, an internal email from Noah Marsh to his fraternity brother, whom he hired as VP of Marketing." The screen lit up. The text was magnified for all to see. Subject: budget cuts. Body cut the driver benefits. They are just consumables. We can always hire more cheap labor. I need that cash flow for the Aspen retreat. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Marta clicked to the next slide. It was a text message thread between Noah and Sienna. "Noah, the trust is an infinite ATM. Babe, as long as the old lady stays in her garden, we are golden." Noah's face turned a sickly shade of grey. He shifted in his seat, looking for his lawyer, who was staring down at the table in defeat. We called a forensic accountant to the stand. He was a dry man with thick glasses who spoke in absolute numbers. "Upon reviewing the Evertide ledger," the accountant stated flatly, "I found $3 million in expenditures labelled as team building. These funds were actually used for private villa rentals in the Maldives, chartered jets, and high-end jewelry purchases. Under the terms of the stewardship trust, this constitutes gross misuse of assets." I felt a surge of relief. We were winning. But then Judge Addison Blake leaned forward. She was a stern woman with eyes that missed nothing. She turned her gaze from the accountant to me. "Ms. Marsh," the judge said, her voice stern. "While the plaintiff's conduct is questionable, I have concerns about your actions as well. You transferred the entire intellectual property portfolio of a publicly traded entity to a private LLC solely under your control for $1. This effectively gutted the value for minority shareholders. Did you not breach your duty to them in your zeal to punish your son? The room went silent. It was a fair question. I had burned the village to save it, and the law did not always look kindly on scorching the earth. The hearing ended in a stalemate, with the judge reserving her decision for the morning. Out in the corridor, the air was heavy. Marta pulled me into a quiet alcove away from the prying ears of the press. She looked worried. "Blake is a wild card," Marta whispered, checking over her shoulder. "She might rule that the transfer to Glass Harbour was illegal. If she does, Noah gets the IP back. He wins on a technicality." I leaned against the cold marble wall. "So what do we do?" Marta opened her briefcase. She hesitated, her hand hovering over a slim pocket. "We have one card left. Evelyn. The nuclear option. That envelope you gave me for safekeeping 30 years ago. My blood ran cold. I knew exactly what was in there." "Marta," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "If we use that, there is no going back. It won't just win the case. It will destroy any memory of us being a family. It rips everything apart." Marta looked me in the eye. "He is already destroying you, Evelyn. He tried to have you committed. The question is, are you willing to let him win to protect a lie?" I looked across the hallway. Noah was laughing with his lawyer, regaining his confidence, thinking he might just wiggle out of this. He looked at me and sneered. "Give it to me," I said. That night, I returned to the granny flat, and the silence felt heavy like a wet wool blanket. I knelt before the closet and pulled out a dented tin box hidden beneath my winter sweaters. It smelled of lavender and old paper. Inside were the letters from my late husband, Robert, who had died of heart failure 20 years ago. At the very bottom lay a thick envelope sealed with wax. On the front, in Robert's shaky handwriting, were the words, "Open only when you truly need freedom." I sat on the floor and closed my eyes, letting the memory wash over me. I was back in the sterile white hospital room. The heart monitor was beeping a slow, erratic rhythm. Robert was gripping my hand, his skin paper thin. Evie. He had wheezed, his eyes full of a desperate guilt. I made a mistake. That summer, with the tennis student, her family. They didn't want the baby. "You need to know before I go." "Noah. He isn't." I had placed a finger over his lips, silencing him. I knew. Deep down, I had always known that the boy did not look like me, but I had chosen to be his mother. I had chosen to wipe his tears and bandage his knees and pay for his mistakes. "He is my son, Robert," I had told him. "Rest now." Back in the present, I opened my eyes. I picked up a rusty letter opener. My hands trembled, not from age, but from the weight of the betrayal I was about to unleash. I sliced the envelope open. Inside was a yellowed document from a laboratory that no longer existed. It was a DNA comparison. Probability of maternity 0%. A tear slid down my cheek. I did not cry because of the biology. I cried because for 3 decades I had honored a silent pact to love a child who was not mine. I had protected Noah from the truth to give him a sense of belonging. But family is a two-way street. Noah had broken the covenant of love first. He had treated me like a stranger, so now I would introduce him to the stranger he really was. Across town, in a weekly rental apartment, Noah clinked a can of cheap beer against Sienna's glass. They were celebrating early. Did you see the comments? Sienna laughed, scrolling through her phone. Hashtag team. Noah is trending. They think your mum is a bitter old witch holding on to power. Noah took a long swig and wiped his mouth. Her lawyer is a joke. Another old woman trying to fight a war she doesn't understand. We have this in the bag. Tomorrow the judge will see she is incompetent, and I will be back in the CEO chair by lunch. The next morning, the air in the courthouse was electric. Marta approached the bench before the session began. She filed a motion to introduce new evidence regarding the standing of the plaintiff. Noah's lawyer, a slick man in a pinstripe suit, snorted. Your Honor, this is just a delay tactic. They are desperate. During the recess, Noah cornered me near the water fountain. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of mints and stale aggression. He thought we were alone. You should have taken the nursing home offer, Mom. He whispered, his voice low and venomous. If the judge rules for me, I am going to put you in a place with no windows. You will never see the sun again. He pulled back, smiling like a loving son. He did not notice the young court clerk standing 5 feet away behind a pillar, her face pale with shock at what she had just heard. I walked back into the courtroom. My fear was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, absolute clarity. I took my seat. Judge Blake looked at the motion Marta had submitted. She frowned. Ms. Marsh, this is highly irregular. This evidence, it is sealed. Are you absolutely certain you want to enter this into the public record? Once it is out, there is no taking it back. I stood up. I looked at Noah, who was smirking at the jury. Then I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady. For 30 years I protected a lie to save a boy's heart. But he has no heart left to save. It is time the truth stopped protecting the wrong person. Marta stood before the bench with the poise of an executioner. She placed the original deed of the Marsh Family Stewardship Trust on the podium. Her voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the silent courtroom. Your Honor, Section 4. Paragraph B of the Trust Bylaws is explicit, Marta stated, tapping the document with a manicured finger. It states that only the direct biological lineage of Evelyn Marsh holds the right to beneficiary status for controlling shares of Evertide and any successor entities. In the absence of such lineage, full reversionary powers return to the grantor. She handed Judge Blake a sealed file. It was the chain of custody DNA test results, verified by an independent lab just 24 hours ago. The judge opened it, her eyes scanning the page behind her spectacles. She looked up at Noah, then back at the paper. This document confirms, the judge read aloud, that the probability of maternity between Evelyn Marsh and Noah Marsh is 0%. Noah stared at the projection screen where the summary was displayed. His face drained of colour, turning the shade of old parchment. He looked at the 0. It was the only number that mattered. No. Noah screamed, leaping from his chair. This is insane. Family isn't just blood. My grandfather. My name is Marsh. I have the name. That is enough. Judge Blake banged her gavel, the sound cracking like a gunshot. Sit down, Mr. Marsh. Your outburst regarding family is noted as a legal admission that you are relying on sentiment, not the binding terms of the trust you are suing under. I stood up slowly. My legs felt heavy, but my spine was made of steel. I looked at the man I had raised. I kept this secret to protect you, Noah, I said, my voice trembling just slightly. I raised you as my own. I gave you the CEO title, the shares, and every chance to prove yourself. You never had a legal right to demand any of it. It was a gift. A gift you threw in the trash the moment you thought I was weak. I took a breath and turned to the gallery. The bloodline clause was added 30 years ago to protect the company from outsiders who view Evertide as nothing more than a gold mine. And after what you did, Noah, you have behaved exactly like a stranger. You are not a Marsh. You are just a man who wanted money he did not earn. Judge Blake looked down at Noah with an expression of cold finality. Mr. Marsh, based on the clear terms of the trust and the evidence presented, you have no legal standing to challenge the trust or the asset transfers. Your case is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I am forwarding this entire file to the district attorney to review for immediate charges of fraud and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Sienna jumped up, her eyes wild with panic. I can do it, she shrieked, looking at the investors in the back row. I can run Evertide. I am his wife. I can take over. Marta did not even look at her. She simply slid a flash drive across the table to the bailiff. We have recovered emails and voice recordings of Mrs. Marsh conspiring to stage the medical incident at Serenity Ridge and discussing how to manipulate the camera angles. The judge nodded to the bailiff. Take her into custody as a co-conspirator. Bail is revoked. That afternoon, the sun broke through the grey clouds over Ravensport. I stood on the wide stone steps of the courthouse facing a wall of cameras. I did not speak to them. Instead, I turned my back on the flashing lights and looked across the street. There, rising 5 stories high, was a sleek building of chrome and glass. Workmen were just finishing hoisting the new signage. It gleamed in the afternoon light, Glass Harbour Dynamics. I had bought the building from a bankrupt tech fund quietly, while Noah was too busy plotting his lawsuit. Diego stood next to me, along with 50 of the best staff members who had walked out of Evertide that morning. We are live. Evelyn, Diego said, smiling. I announced to the gathered press that Glass Harbour would immediately take over all viable shipping routes, ensuring every driver kept their job and every client contract was honoured. Evertide was now nothing but a hollow shell of debt and legal liabilities across the street. Noah stood by the curb. He had been released pending the DA's review, but 2 investigators shadowed his every move. He looked small. He watched me place a hand on the shoulder of a young, brilliant intern, guiding her toward the entrance of my new empire. I met his eyes one last time across the busy road. I did not smile. I did not wave. I simply turned around and walked through the sliding glass doors. They shut behind me with a definitive hiss, sealing out the noise, the betrayal, and the past. I had burned his world to ash, and from it, I had built something that was finally, truly, mine. Thanks so much for listening to my story. Folks, I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So drop your city or country in the comments below. Let's get a conversation going. If you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, please hit that subscribe button for Grandma's Family Diary. Give this video a big like and smash that hype button to help share this story with the world.